Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are really glad you're here for this one. Today, we are wrestling with the ghost. We are trying to pin down something that is invisible, omnipresent, and if the massive stack of research on my desk is to be believed, completely misunderstood by almost everyone,
including the experts.
especially the experts who are supposed to study it, we're talking about society.
It is the water we swim in, and yet, as we're about to find out, we might not actually know what water is. It's one of those words we use every single day, but if you really press someone to define it, it gets vague fast.
That is exactly the feeling I got reading through this. It felt like the floor was dropping out. We have this discipline, sociology, right? It's been around for practically 2 centuries. By definition, it is the science of society.
That is the literal translation, so succis plus logos, the study of the associate or the study of society. Simple enough on the surface.
So the logical assumption, the one I think any reasonable person would make, is that if you have an entire science dedicated to a subject, the scientists would have a rock-solid, agreed-upon definition of what that subject is.
Of course.
You assume biologists know what a cell is. You assume astronomers know what a star is. But the source material for today, specifically this fascinating work by the sociologist Volker Schmidt, opens with a paradox that honestly feels like a prank.
It does.
He says sociology cannot actually define what society is.
It feels like a prank, but it's actually a scandal. It is the fundamental paradox of the field. Imagine if biologists couldn't agree on the definition of life. That is where sociology is. Schmidt argues that the field has spent decades studying society without ever successfully defining the object of its study.
But how is that even possible?
They can describe parts of it, they can describe functions of it, but the thing itself, it remains elusive. It's like trying to grab smoke.
How does that happen? Because if you walked out onto the street right now, pick any city, New York, Berlin, Tokyo, and ask 10 random people what is society, they wouldn't hesitate.
Oh, no, for a second.
They would give you an answer immediately.
They absolutely would. And what answer do you think they would give? What's the go-to answer for pretty much everyone?
They'd point to the map. They'd say, well, look around. We are in American society. Or if they were in Berlin, German society. They equate society with the country, the nation.
Exactly. And that is what sociologists call the container problem.
The container problem. I love that visual. Let's unpack that.
It is the default setting for our brains. It's almost automatic. When we hear the word society, we mentally visualize a container. Usually, that container is the nation state.
It's got borders.
It has a border, a government, a flag, and passport control. We assume that everything inside those lines is the society, and everything outside is something else.
It's a sealed unit.
A neat, tidy, sealed unit. And this isn't just the layperson's mistake, right? I mean, this is baked into the discipline itself.
Right. I was looking at the notes on Anthony Giddens, who is basically the godfather of modern sociology textbooks. If you took Sociology 101, you probably read Giddens, and he does the same thing.
He does. And this is why it's so entrenched. Generations of students have been raised on Giddens' textbooks. He explicitly defines society as a political unit. He even lists the criteria.
Yeah, I saw that. It's like a checklist.
It is. To be a society, you must have a distinct territory, a political authority, and a shared culture. Essentially, he says society equals the nation state. Case closed.
Which seems tidy. It's a neat box to put things in. It makes sense on a certain level.
It is very tidy. It makes it easy to collect statistics, the unemployment rate of American society, the GDP of French society. But Schmidt argues this is a massive blind spot.
Because the world doesn't actually work in neat boxes.
Not anymore. Maybe it never did. By forcing society into the box of the nation state, we stop seeing how the world actually works. We miss the flows, the networks, the things that spill over the edges. But before we deconstruct why that model is broken, we have to understand how we got here.
Right. How did this idea get so powerful?
Schmidt identifies a specific intellectual habit that led to this confusion. He calls it the X in society syndrome.
I highlighted this part in the notes. It sounds like a bad medical diagnosis. I'm sorry, you have a bad case of X in society.
In a way, it is a pathology of modern specialization. Think about how the modern university is built. Think about how knowledge is organized. You have a department of economics. You have a law school. You have a department of religious studies. You have medicine.
Everyone has their lane. Everyone stays in their silo.
Correct. So the economist studies the market, the prices, the supply, the demand. The lawyer studies the legal code. But they can't ignore the rest of the world entirely. They know their field exists in a context, so what do?
They create these subdisciplines.
Exactly. They create these subdisciplines. economy and society, law and society, science and society.
I see those book titles everywhere. It seems like a way to be interdisciplinary, like you're broadening your horizons.
It pretends to be. But look closely at what that grammatical structure does. It separates the X, the economy, the law, the science from society. The X is the foreground. It gets all the focus, all the rigorous definition, all the mathematical modeling. And society, what happens to that word?
Society becomes the background. It's the wallpaper.
Yeah.
The context.
Worse. Schmidt calls it a residual category. It becomes the trash bin. Society is just everything that isn't the economy, or everything that isn't the law.
So it's the leftovers.
It's the conceptual leftovers. If you are an economist, society is the irrational stuff that messes up your models, culture, family, tradition. If you are a lawyer, society is just the people the law acts upon. It's what's left over after you've carved out your specialized piece of the world.
That's a huge problem. Because if everyone does that, if the economist says society is the non-economic stuff, and the priest says society is the non-religious stuff, and the doctor says society is the non-medical stuff, then what is actually left in the bin?
Nothing.
It's empty.
It's hollow. If society is just everything else for everyone, it has no content of its own. It becomes a phantom concept. We're using a word that we think refers to the whole, but in practice, it refers to nothing at all.
So we're walking around using a word that we think means everything, but analytically, it's basically a placeholder.
Which brings us to the mission of this deep dive. To fix this, to understand what society actually is, we have to stop treating society like a natural object. It isn't a mountain, it isn't a tree, it isn't a coral reef, it didn't just appear on the earth.
It was invented.
It was invented. It is a specific, historically contingent tool. It's a piece of social technology that was built by lawyers, politicians, and priests over the course of 2,500 years. And to understand what it really is, and maybe to figure out what it should be today, we have to trace that invention. We have to look at the blueprints.
We are doing a genealogy. We're going back to the beginning.
We are. We are going to track the word societas from its birth in ancient Rome, through the collapse of the empire, into the chaos of the Middle Ages, and finally to the modern confusion of the nation-state. And I promise you, by the end of this, you will never use the word society the same way again.
I'm ready. So let's hop in the time machine. Destination, ancient Rome. But before we land, we need to handle a bit of linguistic housekeeping. Sociology. It's a mashup word, isn't it? I always felt a little clunky to me.
It's a linguistic Frankenstein, actually, a total hybrid. It was coined by Auguste Comte in the 19th century. He was trying to create a new science, social physics. He took the Latin socius, meaning companion, ally, or partner, and the Greek logos, meaning word, reason, or knowledge.
Latin and Greek stitched together.
Stitched together in an unholy alliance. Which is a bit of a faux pas in classical studies, isn't it? You usually stick to one root.
Yeah, purist would have a fit.
But Schmidt points out a fascinating counterfactual history here. We ended up with sociology and the concept of society because the Romans dominated the Western legal and political tradition. Their words became our words. But imagine if history had pivoted slightly.
How so?
Imagine if Mark Antony had won the Battle of Actium instead of Augustus. Antony and Cleopatra's power base was in the east, in Alexandria.
So Rome turns east. The Greek world becomes the center.
Precisely. The center of gravity of the Mediterranean shifts to the Greek-speaking world. Alexandria becomes the capital, not Rome. In that timeline, we might not be using the Latin word societas at all. We might be using the Greek word for community or association, which is koinonia.
So instead of sociology, we would be studying
Koinoniology.
koinoniology. That sounds like something you'd need a prescription cream for. Ask your doctor about koinoniology.
It doesn't quite roll off the tongue, does it? But the point is, words matter. The word koinonia has a very different flavor. It implies a deep, organic community, a communion. It's almost spiritual. It's about belonging. But we didn't get koinonia. We got the Latin, societas. And societas does not mean community. It does not mean warm, fuzzy feelings.
Okay, so let's land in Rome. Say 100 BC. The Republic is in full swing. It's chaotic. It's vibrant. If I am a Roman citizen walking through the Forum and I hear the word societas, what image pops into my head?
Yeah.
Because based on what you just said, I'm assuming I don't picture the Roman population.
Absolutely not. That wouldn't even cross your mind. If you hear societas, you aren't thinking about the state. You aren't thinking about the people. You are thinking about a contract.
A contract, like a piece of paper, a legal document.
A business deal. In Roman law, a societas was a specific legal mechanism. It fell under private law. It wasn't a state of being. It was a tool you used to get things done, specifically to make money.
This is a huge shift from how we use it. Today, society feels huge and vague. We live in a society. In Rome, it was specific and concrete. So walk me through it. If you and I enter a societas, what are we actually doing?
Okay. We are signing what the lawyers called a societas consensu contracta, a consensual partnership. You and I become soci partners. We agree to pool our assets for a specific purpose.
So it's instrumental.
Entirely. Let's make it concrete. Maybe I have a pile of capital gold coins and you have a ship. We form a societas to sail to Egypt, buy grain, bring it back to the port at Ostia, and sell it for a profit.
Okay. We do the run, we sell the grain, we make a profit. Then what? What happens to our societas?
The societas is over. We split the profits according to our agreement, shake hands, and walk away. The society ceases to exist because its purpose has been fulfilled.
So it's purely instrumental. We aren't doing it because we love each other or because we share a national identity. We're doing it to make money. It's a tool for strangers to cooperate.
That's the perfect way to put it. But there is a massive catch in Roman law, one that is really hard for us moderns to wrap our heads around. The Roman societas had no corporate personality.
No corporate personality. That sounds like a legal technicality, but I have a feeling it's important.
It is crucial. It's the whole ballgame. In modern law, if you and I start a corporation, let's call it Deep Dive Inc., that corporation is a person in the eyes of the law. It has its own tax ID. It can own property.
And it can outlive us.
Exactly. If I die, Deep Dive Inc. keeps going. It owns the microphones. It has the bank account. My kids might inherit my shares, but the company doesn't blink. It's a separate entity.
Right. The company is separate from the people who started it. It's a zombie. It lives forever.
Rome didn't have that. They didn't have that concept. In a Roman societas, the partnership was the partners. It had no separate existence. If you and I form our grain shipping societas and then you die, the society dissolves instantly.
It just poofs out of existence. The whole deal is off.
Instantly. Because the contract was personal. It was between you and me. Without you, there is no contract. Even if we had a long-term goal, the legal entity was incredibly fragile. It couldn't outlive its members. If one partner went bankrupt or renounced the partnership, the whole thing collapsed.
That seems terribly inefficient. How did they build anything lasting if every partnership dissolved every time someone died or quit? That seems like a massive constraint on their economy.
It was a huge constraint, and that's where the history gets interesting, because there were roots of a different idea. Schmidt takes us back to the archaic period, the really old days of Rome, before it was an empire. There was something called the Societas Irctonancito.
My Latin is rusty. Undivided inheritance.
Exactly. It's a mouthful. But imagine a father dies and leaves a farm to 3 sons. In the very early days, to preserve the family wealth, they wouldn't chop the farm into 3 small, useless pieces.
Right, they would ruin the estate.
They would keep it whole. They would run it together. They were brothers in partnership, a society born of blood and land.
So that's a partnership based on blood. It's natural, not contractual.
It's the natural prototype. It wasn't a choice. It was a necessity of inheritance. But as Rome exploded into a massive commercial empire, they couldn't rely on blood ties. You needed to do business with strangers. You needed to do business with people from other cities. So the Roman lawyers took that ancient idea of brotherhood and secularized it. They turned it into a contract.
So you and I could be artificial brothers.
Artificial brothers for the sake of a deal. For the duration of the contract, we owed each other the loyalty of brothers, but only in that specific context.
Artificial brothers for profit. That sounds like the slogan for a modern investment bank.
It's not far off. It's the commodification of brotherhood. And speaking of investment banks, we have to talk about the Societas Publicanorum. This is where the Roman concept of society really starts to look like Wall Street.
The publicani. I remember them from history class. They were the tax farmers, usually the villains in the New Testament.
They often get a bad rap in religious texts, but in Rome, they were the titans of industry. They were the engine of the empire. You have to remember, the Roman Republic didn't have a big bureaucracy. There was no Department of Public Works, no IRS, no Army Logistics Corps.
The state was actually very small.
Tiny. The Senate made policy, but they didn't have the staff to execute it. So who built the aqueducts? Who fed the legions? Who collected the taxes?
Private contractors.
Exactly. The state would auction off these massive tasks. Every 5 years, the censors would stand up in the forum and say, we need to collect taxes in the province of Asia, or we need 10,000 swords and uniforms for the army in Gaul.
And these contracts were too big for one guy. You couldn't have one rich person funding all that.
No single person had the capital to guarantee the tax revenue of an entire province. That's millions of denarii. It was an enormous risk. So, the businessmen formed a societas publicanorum.
So this was a consortium, a big one.
A massive one. And they had a lead investor called the manceps. He was the face of the deal. He signed the contract with the magistrate. But behind him were hundreds, maybe thousands of investors, shares being traded in the forum, profits being divided. It was a joint stock company before the name existed.
This sounds exactly like a modern corporation. You have shareholders, you have a CEO.
It is strikingly close. And this is where the no corporate personality rule caused big problems. These tax contracts lasted for years. You couldn't have the whole system collapse just because one investor in Tuscany had a heart attack.
The army needs bread, regardless of whether the manceps is alive.
Precisely. So what did they do?
They had to find a workaround.
They fudged it. The Roman lawyers had to perform mental gymnastics. They basically treated the Societas Publicanorum as if it were a person, giving it continuity, allowing it to own property. But they never formally crossed the line to call it a separate entity.
So they bent the rules, but never broke them.
They were bumping their heads against the ceiling of their legal technology. They had the economic reality of a corporation, but they were stuck with the legal language of a partnership. It was a kludge, but it worked well enough to run an empire.
So society in Rome is definitely business. It's Wall Street, it's contracts. But the notes say they also use the word for the exact opposite: war and international relations.
Yes, the military societas. This is where the concept gets dark and really, really cynical.
Okay, lay it on me.
Rome was an expansionist power, but they didn't always just occupy a territory. Often they would defeat a neighbor and then sign a treaty of alliance.
We aren't conquerors, we are partners.
Exactly. They would make the defeated city a socius, an ally, a member of the Roman societas. It sounds so much nicer than vassal state or conquered territory.
But that's a partnership at sort point. It's not voluntary.
It's a Godfather offer. But here is the fascinating legal fiction they had to maintain. Remember, a societas is a contract. And to sign a contract, you must be free.
Right. A slave can't sign a contract.
A slave cannot sign a contract. A piece of property cannot sign a contract. So if Rome completely destroys a city and enslaves everyone, they can't be allies. So what did they do? The process was called deditio. Rome would force a city to surrender unconditionally.
So they give up everything.
The city effectively ceases to exist. It becomes Roman property. The people are technically slaves. The walls are forfeit. Everything.
Okay, that sounds like the end of the story. They lost.
But then, 5 minutes later, the Roman general would restore their freedom. He would hand the city back to its people, grant them autonomy.
Why? Just to be nice. Seems out of character.
No, he restored their freedom specifically so they would have the legal standing to sign a treaty of submission. He creates a free partner, just so that partner can sign away their autonomy to Rome.
That is incredibly cynical. I give you your freedom back solely so you can legally sign it away to me.
It's the fiction of freedom. The partner was legally free, but practically a client state. But it shows how deeply ingrained the idea of societas as a contract was. Even when it was conqueror and conquered, they had to dress it up as a voluntary agreement between partners.
So up to this point, society is a tool. It's a mechanism for trade or for empire management. It's cold, it's legal, it's instrumental. When does it become us? When does it become a community?
For that shift, we have to look at one specific man, Marcus Tullius Cicero.
The orator.
Yeah.
The guy whose speeches everyone has to translate in Latin class.
The very same. But he was also a philosopher and a politician trying to save a dying republic. And he is the man who gave us the term Societas Civilis, civil society.
This feels like the pivot point, Societas Civilis.
It is. This is the moment the word starts to expand and become something more like what we recognize today. Cicero was trying to translate Greek philosophy into Latin. He was reading Aristotle, who talked about the koinonia, the political community.
Our old friend Koinonia.
Cicero needs a Latin equivalent, and he chooses Societas Civilis. But in doing so, he changes the flavor entirely.
How does the flavor change?
Remember, the business societas is instrumental. You join to make a profit. Cicero argues that civil society is different. It is a society of citizens, massifes, and we don't join it just to make money. We join it because we are human.
Innate sociality, the idea that we're social animals.
Yes. He argues that humans are not just calculating business partners. We have an innate sociality. We are wired to live together. We can't help it. So civil society isn't just a contract. It's our natural state. It is the framework for justice and law.
He calls it the res publica, the public thing.
The res publica, which literally translates to the public thing or the people's affair. And Cicero gives this famous definition. He says the res publica is the res populi, the people's thing.
The people's thing. That sounds very democratic, very inclusive. We the people.
It sounds great. It sounds modern. It's the kind of thing you'd put on a monument. But here is where we hit the paradox of the people. Because when Cicero says the people, populace, he does not mean everybody.
We have to look at the fine print.
The fine print is brutal. Who counts as the people in Rome? Not women, not slaves, not foreigners, and often not even the poor.
The proletariat.
Proletary. Do you know what that word actually means in its Roman context? We hear it today and think of Marx, factories, the working class hero.
I assume it just means the working class.
Weimar.
The laborers.
In the Roman census, the proletaria were the absolute bottom class of citizens. The word comes from proles, meaning offspring. The definition of a proletarian was a man who owns nothing but his children.
Wow, that is bleak.
It is. Your only contribution to the state is breeding. You provide bodies for the army or the workforce. You have no property, no real stake in the res publica. So while you are physically in the city, you aren't really considered part of the people who own the republic.
So you are technically in the city, physically present, but you aren't part of the people. You aren't in the societas civilis.
In Cicero's ideal view, no. And this creates a massive tension. We all know the acronym SPQR. You see it on tattoos, on flags, in movies. Senatus Populusque Romanus.
The Senate and the people of Rome.
It sounds like a unity, a partnership. But in reality, for much of Roman history, it was two hostile societies living in one city. You had the Senate, the elite, the wealthy families, the optimates, and you had the plebs, the masses, the populares.
And they didn't just disagree, they hated each other.
They were in a state of low-grade civil war for centuries. Cicero himself was terrified of the multitude. He called them the mob. He didn't want a democracy. He wanted a mixed constitution, where the elite people like him, the wise and educated, guided the masses. He wanted the stability of a societas, but he didn't want the equality of a partnership.
And this leads to what the source notes call the metaphor clash. This really stood out to me. We have two different ways of thinking about society, fighting each other in the Roman mind.
This is one of the most important insights in Schmidt's analysis. We are still dealing with this clash today. On one hand, you have the metaphor of the contract, societas,
which implies a voluntary agreement among equals. I sign, you sign, we are partners. It's horizontal.
Right. We look each other in the eye as equals. But on the other hand, you have the metaphor of the body, the corpus, the body politic. This comes from the Greeks too. The city is like a human body.
And a body is not horizontal. It's not a partnership.
No. A body is vertical. A body is hierarchical. The head rules the feet. The feet don't get to vote on where the head goes. The feet don't sign a contract with the stomach. They just do their job as part of an organic whole.
So Cicero is trying to have it both ways. He wants a society of free citizens, the contract idea, but he also wants the elite to rule the body idea.
Exactly. It's a contradiction. How can you have a society of free, equal partners that is also a natural hierarchy where the head rules the feet? Rome never solved that. They just oscillated between them until the Republic fell and the emperors took over.
At which point the body metaphor won.
Decisively. The emperor became the head, and everyone else became the subjects. The contract was torn up. And the idea of society as a voluntary partnership, it goes dormant.
It goes into hibernation. The empire collapses. We enter the so-called Dark Ages. Urban life crashes. The great roads fall into disrepair. The world fragments. But the concept of societas, it survives.
It does. It hides in the monasteries, in church law, and it survives in the limited trade that continues across the Mediterranean. It's waiting.
And it wakes up again in the 11th century. The commercial revolution.
This is part 3 of our story. Europe starts to wake up. Trade picks up in Italy, Venice, Florence, Genoa. These cities become economic powerhouses. And what do merchants need when they start trading with strangers again?
They need contracts. They need the societas back.
Precisely. They rediscover Roman law. They revive the Roman economic societas. You start seeing legal forms like the commenda or the campagna.
Campagna. Comedy. There it is.
Etymologically, it means bread sharers, cumpanes, those who break bread together. But the shift here is fascinating. In the early Middle Ages, partnerships were family-based, brothers, blood. But as trade exploded, you needed to partner with people you weren't related to. You needed the instrumental contract again.
So the business side comes roaring back. But the political side is even crazier. I had no idea about this until I read these notes. We think of a city-state like Florence or Bologna as a society, Florentine society. But Schmidt says they weren't a society. They were a collection of societies.
This is a wild period. We have to shed our modern container view completely here. In 12th or 13th century Bologna, the state was weak. The official government couldn't really police the streets or enforce contracts very well. It was just a weak umbrella.
So people had to fend for themselves?
They had to organize for self-protection. They formed their own groups, and they called these groups societates.
So you had a society of knights.
The societas militum, the nobles, the guys on horses, the old landed aristocracy. They formed a society to protect their interests, almost like a union for aristocrats. They had their own codes, their own loyalties.
And the regular people. The merchants, the artisans.
The societas populi, the society of the people, the merchants, the butchers, the bakers. They organized themselves into a society specifically to fight the nobles.
Wait, so society wasn't the whole city. It was a faction. It was a political party with a militia.
Exactly. A city wasn't a society. It was a battleground of societies. If you walked around 13th century Bologna, you'd see these tall stone towers. Those were private fortresses. Some were owned by the societas militum, and others were owned by the societas populi.
That is mind-blowing.
They had their own councils, their own laws, their own judges, and their own armies. It's like if the Democrats and Republicans had their own private armies and their own court systems, and the United States was just the geographical battlefield where they fought.
A pluralistic civil war. So society was something you joined to fight against other societies.
Yes. Your primary loyalty was to your guild, the Societas Mercatorum, the Society of Merchants, or to your political faction. You weren't really a member of Bologna in the same way we think of being a citizen today.
But out of this chaos comes a legal revolution that gives us the modern world. And it comes from a surprising place. Not from the merchants, but from the church.
It does. Enter Pope Innocent V, mid-13th century. He's a canon lawyer and a brilliant one.
Okay, what did the Pope do for sociology?
He solved a massive legal problem. The problem of collective guilt and corporate existence that had stumped the Romans.
Explain that. What was the problem?
Okay. Suppose you have a cathedral chapter, a group of canons who run a church, or a city council, and they do something wrong. Let's say the group supports a heresy, or the city rebels against the Pope. How do you punish them?
You excommunicate the whole group.
But if you do that, you are damning innocent people to hell, along with the guilty ones. What if only 3 of the 10 council members voted to rebel? Do you punish all 10? If a bishop acts wrongly, is the whole church guilty? If one merchant cheats, is the whole guild guilty?
The old Roman societas didn't have a good answer because it was just a collection of individuals.
Exactly. If you punish the group, you were just punishing the individuals within it. There was no in-between.
So what did Innocent V do?
He invented the persona ficta, the fictitious person.
The fictitious person. This is the magic trick.
It is the greatest legal magic trick in history. He argued that a corporation, a universitas, is a person by legal fiction. It is an abstract entity distinct from the humans inside it.
So the corporation is a person, but it doesn't have a soul.
Exactly. As Innocent famously said, a corporation cannot be excommunicated because it has no soul to lose. It has no body to torture or imprison. It cannot commit a sin. You can punish the corporation, fine it, strip its rights, dissolve it, without damning the souls of the individuals inside it.
This bridges the gap we talked about earlier. The Roman societas dissolved when a partner died. But a persona ficta
lives forever, or at least it lives as long as the law says it does. It solves the Roman continuity problem, and it bridges the gap between the contract and the body.
How so?
Now, you can create a body, a legal person, just by writing a statute. You don't need nature, you don't need blood ties, you just need the law to declare that this group is now a single fictional person. It's the creation of an artificial body through a legal contract.
This is the birth of the modern corporation.
It is the birth of the modern organization, and eventually the modern state. Because if a group of monks can be a fictional person, why can't the state itself be a fictional person? Why can't the nation be a fictional person?
And once that door is opened, everybody walks through it.
Everybody. This leads us to part 4, the modern confusion. Because once you can create a society by legal fiat, people start doing it everywhere.
We jump to the 17th and 18th centuries, and suddenly the word society is exploding.
It's everywhere. You have the Royal Society for Science, you have the Society of Antiquaries for history buffs, you have secret societies like the Freemasons, student societies at universities. It's the hip new way to organize any collective endeavor.
Francis Bacon's New Atlantis even models his scientific utopia as a society.
He does. It becomes the go-to word for any group of people doing anything. But most importantly for our story, the joint stock company.
Ah, yes. The East India Company, the Hudson's Bay Company.
We forget this, but when the East India Company was founded, it was called a society, a joint stock society. It was a group of investors in a partnership, but now armed with this legal fiction of being a single immortal person.
So a massive empire-building, army-having, profit-making corporation was called a society.
Yes, and note the connection. These private societies acted like governments. The East India Company colonized India, they waged war, they coined their own money, they had their own courts, they were a societas publicanorum on steroids.
So at this point, in the 1700s, society can mean a business, a science club, a group of knights, or a nation. It's still very plural. You can be a member of 10 different societies.
Precisely. The meaning is flexible and plural. But then, something happens in the English language, a split. A crucial divergence. And this is where we get the container problem we started with.
Who is responsible for this?
We can blame or credit Frederick William Maitland. He was a giant of English law in the late 19th century, a brilliant historian of law.
The semantic split.
Maitland was translating massive German legal texts into English. Now, the Germans have a word, Genossenschaft, and the French have société. In those languages, the word is flexible. It can mean a business or the nation.
Right. In France today, if you see a sign that says Société Générale, that's a bank. It's a company.
But Maitland, as a translator, refused to translate the business term as society in English. He thought it was confusing. He insisted on using partnership for the small stuff and company for the big stuff.
So he stripped the word society of its business meaning, for English speakers only.
He sterilized it. In English, society was elevated. It was stripped away from the gritty world of profit and contracts. It was reserved only for the high stuff, the nation, the state, civil society, high society.
And that's why today, if I say I work for a society, people think I work for a charity or a secret club. Yeah. They don't think I work for Apple or Google.
Exactly. We lost the connection. In our minds, society became this lofty, singular thing. The nation and company became the place for economics. We mentally separated them, even though they grew from the exact same root.
And Adam Smith played a role in this too, right? He kind of set the stage for this split.
He was the pivot. It's fascinating to read his 2 major works back to back. In his early work, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, society is still civil society. It's face-to-face, it's moral. It's about how we develop sympathy for our neighbor.
It's small scale. Yeah. It's about community.
But then comes The Wealth of Nations. And in that book, society becomes the whole society. It becomes the container. The nation-state is the box, and the market happens inside it. He starts talking about the wealth of society as a whole, meaning the nation.
So by the time we get to the 20th century, and the sociologist Talcott Parsons comes along,
the trap is shut. The cement is dry. Sociology, especially in America under Parsons, decides there is only one type of society worth studying. The self-sufficient nation-state. Everything else, business, religion, family, is just a system or an association inside that one big society.
And that brings us back to where we started, the container problem. Sociology spent 100 years studying German society or American society as if they were sealed boxes.
Methodological nationalism, that's the fancy term for it. The assumption that the nation-state is the natural, God-given unit of analysis.
But that model is failing today. It feels completely broken.
It's obsolete. Look at the world we live in. Does the economy stop at the border?
Definitely not. A stock crash in Shanghai hits New York in milliseconds. A supply chain decision in Taiwan affects car prices in Michigan.
Does climate change stop at the border? Do pandemics stop at the border.
No. The virus doesn't check for a passport. The carbon dioxide molecule doesn't care about national sovereignty.
We live in a world where the most important processes ignore the container. Science is global. Finance is global. Digital communication is global. If I am on a server playing a game with someone in Korea and someone in Brazil, which society are we in?
We aren't in American society or Korean society. We are in a digital network, a new kind of societas.
Exactly. So the definition of society as the nation state is actually blinding us to reality. It's a blind spot. We are trying to study a global reality with the concept invented by Roman lawyers and medieval popes to describe something totally different.
So what's the solution? Do we need a world society? Is that the next container?
That is what scholars like Nicholas Luhmann and Emanuel Wallerstein argue. They say we have moved to a world society. Now, be careful. They don't mean a world government. There is no global state.
Right, there is no global president, thank goodness.
But there is a world society, a single communicative system that covers the globe. The financial system is a single system. The scientific community is a single system. If a scientist in India publishes a paper, a scientist in Canada reads it. That is one society of science.
That feels huge.
Yeah.
A world society is almost too big to grasp.
It is. But Schmidt suggests we can also look back to move forward. Remember the Roman societas? It was flexible. It was a network. It was a partnership for a specific goal.
It wasn't a container. It was a connection.
Exactly. Maybe we need to recover that flexible meaning. Maybe society isn't a box we live in. Maybe it's the networks we create, the partnerships we form, the alliances we build. Plural, flexible, temporary.
That is a powerful idea. If society is just a legal fiction we invented to organize ourselves.
Then we are free to invent a new kind of society, a new legal fiction that fits our current reality.
We don't have to be stuck with the mental maps of Cicero or Maitland.
No. The invention of society is an ongoing process, and we are the ones inventing it, whether we realize it or not.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me. If we accept that society is just a tool, a concept we build, then the crisis we feel today, that sense that society is falling apart, maybe it's just that the tool is broken.
Or that we're using a hammer to type an email. The tool doesn't fit the task. The map doesn't fit the territory anymore.
Right. We are trying to cram a global, digital, fluid reality into a 19th century nation-state box. Of course, it feels like it's breaking.
And that creates friction. It creates anxiety. Because we look for society to be this warm, protective blanket, the body politic. But our reality is actually a series of cold instrumental contracts, a global market.
The clash of metaphors again. We want the body, we have the contract, all the way from Cicero to today.
And that tension isn't going away, but realizing that it is a tension, that these are just metaphors, just tools, gives us power. It means we can choose which metaphors to use. We can build new forms of societas.
So what does this all mean for the listener? Why should they care about Roman tax farmers or medieval monks?
Because the words we use shape what we can see. They create our reality. If you think society equals the government or the nation, you are going to look to the state to solve every problem. And you're going to be constantly disappointed when it can't, because the problem is global.
But if you see society as a series of overlapping partnerships and networks,
then you realize that you are building society every day. Every time you form a group, every time you connect with someone across a border, every time you participate in a global conversation, you are weaving the fabric of a new kind of society.
we aren't just inhabitants of a container. We are the architects.
We are the socii, the partners. It puts the agency back in our hands.
I love that. From tax farmers to global citizens, we are all just looking for partners.
And hopefully finding better ways to live together.
This has been an incredible journey. From the Roman Forum to the medieval towers of Bologna, all the way to the global internet. It turns out society isn't a thing.
It's an activity.
It's a verb, not a noun.
It's a verb. It's something we do.
I'm going to be thinking about that for a long time. Society is a verb.
It changes everything.
It really does. Thank you so much for guiding us through this labyrinth.
My pleasure. It's a fascinating and I think a really empowering history.
And for you listening, here is a final thought to chew on. If society is an invention, a piece of technology we built and can't rebuild, what kind of society would you invent if you started from scratch today? What would its rules be? Would it be a body, a contract, or something completely new? Think about it, and we will see you in the next deep dive.